So what is the movie Big? Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it a romance? Is it all three? Does it know what it is? No. This is a clumsy, boring production. I'm going to dive into it. So here we go.
All the gin joints and all.
Busy living.
I watched sea beams.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
All right, so this movie, you kind of want to like it because Tom Hanks is a nice guy and he plays a sort of antic, older man, about a 30-year-old man. So let's start back. And he's off and on, but he overplays the character. So let's just start with what this movie's about. If you've heard about this movie or if you've seen the trailer, you know it's about a boy gets tired of being younger, gets tired of being a boy. He wants to be big. He wants to grow up. And so he does. He goes to a carnival, to a Zoltar machine. That's unplugged. And so it's sort of a mystical experience anyway. Cut to the chase. He gets older. And then, of course, he decides that he doesn't want to be older anymore, so he has to go in search of the Zoltar machine. Meanwhile, he goes to New York, gets a job, and there's a bunch of tons of scenes in that. He's sort of a foil, sort of the happy kid foil for the adults, you know, the sort of jaded business people adults, and there's all of that. There's supposed to be a bunch of humor there, but there's actually very little because the writing in this movie is just simply god-awful bad. It's like the writers of this movie, and who is that? The writers are Gary Ross and Ann Spielberg. Ann Spielberg's the sister of Steven Spielberg Anyway, Gary evidently doesn't remember what it's like to be a 12-year-old. And, of course, Ann, is it? Yeah, Ann Spielberg. Ann was never a 12-year-old boy, so she couldn't know, so she would have to get advice. Well, since Gary didn't know and they couldn't get advice, they didn't know how to write this script. So what you get in this movie is a 12-year-old boy who doesn't really act like a 12-year-old boy, because Tom Hanks doesn't do that. Tom Hanks plays this boy as sort of a romantic, you know, kind of free-spirited boy. You know, but it's not entire, and it just doesn't ring true. His performance doesn't ring true. I kept finding myself going, really, oh my God, okay, I wouldn't have done that. None of my 24 guy friends would have done that stuff.
Did they pay you for that?
And so you just end up getting a lot of really hokey scenes, like the way he sits in a chair, which frankly, by the time I was 12 or 13 years old and all my friends, we didn't do that. We did that when we were 7 or 8, you know, with his legs bent. And then you've got that really cringy, there's a couple of cringy scenes where he just, concerning romance, that just don't work out. Anyway, so the first part of this review, I'm not going to give away any plot spoilers. That's going to come in just a few minutes when I do a dive into this movie. But suffice it to say that this movie just doesn't know where it's going to go. And the directing on it by Penny Marshall is just simply god-awful bad. It's tone deaf. This movie doesn't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be a comedy? Is it going to be a drama? Is it going to be a romance? Is it going to mix those three really nicely, like Wedding Crashers did, like Groundhog Day did, you know, like even Some Like It Hot, like it did, you know, the great comedies. They can mix all those three. In fact, really, that's your best comedy. You know, Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing, Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night. You know, mixing the drama with the comedy, with the romance. You know, it can be done. It should be done, really. I think those are the best comedies. But this one just can't figure out what it's going to do. And what it seems like it's going to do, it's trying to set up for is some sort of romance with the older Josh, the 12-year-old boy who turns into a 30-year-old man. So I'm not going to go into all of that right now, but there's a bunch of famous scenes from this movie. And even in those scenes, there are some issues with the directing and even the acting. So really what I just want to say as a synopsis on this movie is it's a 3 yawner. I yawned 3 times on this movie. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, which is really surprising because this movie, the critics seem to love this movie. I mean, it's ranked way up there. You know, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, the New York critics, all of them, they just love this. And, you know, frankly, if there's going to be an award given out on this movie, Tom Hanks was nominated for, and I think he won a Golden Globe on this for his performance. He should not have. But it should have been the boy's best friend, Josh's best friend when he's younger. His name is Billy in the movie. He's played by Jared Rushton. That boy should have gotten a freaking Oscar for his performance. In fact, if they wanted to make this movie interesting, because he's so rambunctious, so sassy, so confident, so cool.
Don't worry about it.
Social security number?
32, 17, 25.
What is it?
A locker combination.
Great.
They should have made him the centerpiece of this movie and made Josh's character the one who helped out or whatever. You know, he was his best friend. But I just want to give you, before I go into the plot spoilers, I want to show you a scene in this that is an example of how badly done this movie is. And I think it's in the trailer. It is in the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away here that you won't see in the trailer. But before I show you this scene, think about how you would feel. You get up in the morning, you're twice as big as you were when you went to bed. You're going to know that, right? When you hop out of bed, you're going to know you're twice as big, right? Okay. He doesn't. Josh, after he turns big in the morning. Okay, so then he goes to the bathroom. Now, if you're a completely different looking human being, when you look in the mirror in the bathroom for the first time, what are you going to do? You may jump backwards, hit the wall, fall into the bathtub, scream, shout, what? Look behind you because there may be somebody standing behind you. You're going to freak your shit out. Not in this movie, not Josh. Look at this. That's just absurd. He looks, he's kind of like, huh? Opens up the cabinet, sees if there's something behind the mirror. I mean, this is how bad the directing is on this movie. And maybe that was written into the script as well, that that's what he's supposed to do. But if that was written in the script, it's up to the director to change that shit. But this movie, it's so ham-handed, the way that's done, so phony. And it just over and over and over in this movie, that's what you get. It's like you're like, it wouldn't happen that way in real life. So the thing with this is, I got no problem with a movie having conceit, starting out with a conceit, you know, even if it's supernatural, whatever. So the conceit in this movie is the body swap, you know, been done many times. In fact, it was done 4 times around that same year that this came out in 1988. 3 different movies, which is pretty weird. But I've got no problem with that conceit. Okay, you want to have a body swap? He goes up to to a future teller, whatever that machine is, and he ends up getting turned into a 30-year-old guy. I got no problem with that. That's great. Which one of us, when we were younger, did not want to be 25 or 30 years old? Get me out of childhood. I want to be in charge of me. I want to take out the trash when I damn well feel like taking out the trash. I want to be in charge of my own food, everything else. So yeah, I get that. That's fine. So that aspect, the body swap conceit, is fine with me. You got me. I'm good. But you can't keep straining credulity through the movie. The movie itself has to have credibility in these situations. But this movie doesn't. And so I'm going to go into those in depth here in just a minute. So my recommendation, I'm going to give this movie probably 3 popcorns out of 10, at the end of this review. So my recommendation is don't watch the movie. Really. Unless you just, you want to. But what this movie ends up being is an accidental film noir. I'm going to explain that here in a minute. So here we go with the deep dive and the plot spoilers. Okay, as I was alluding to a little while ago, this movie just doesn't know what it wants to be, where it's going to go. What is the purpose of Josh turning into 30 years old and going to New York? Is he still that 13-year-old boy in there? We get a sense that he is because of the way he's talking to Billy when he first sees Billy after turning big. And, of course, him getting chased out of the house by his mom. So he does seem to be, the beginning of this is he is 13. He's a 13-year-old brain inside of a 30-year-old body. That's what he is. But over and over and over in this movie, he keeps turning into a 30-year-old guy. The way he responds to people, what he does. The most obvious point in this is when he and Susan at the business, who's played by Elizabeth Perkins, the lovely Elizabeth Perkins, and she did a nice job, but he goes in for the big kiss with her while they're dancing. Yeah, let me just say, no boy, no 12-year-old, maybe 13th birthday, whatever, however old he is at that point. I think he's just barely 13. He's just had his 13th birthday. No 13-year-old boy is going to kiss like that. I know I didn't. I know none of my friends did. You don't kiss like that until maybe you're 15, 16, 17, maybe 18. The deep dive kiss. No, that romantic type of kiss, a 13-year-old boy just doesn't have it in him. That's a man kissing there. And it confuses the movie. And there's a reason why they do that. Because he's about to sleep with her a few scenes later. Unbelievably. The writers and Penny Marshall have him sleeping with Susan. And there's that really cringeworthy, uncomfortable bra scene. She takes off her shirt. And he's feeling her breasts. What is that? Are we supposed to enjoy that? He's a 13-year-old boy, and she's what, a 28, 29, 30-year-old woman? Really? And he doesn't tell her? He doesn't tell her that he's actually 13. Barely. And so they go have sex. And the problem this creates, because they didn't leave him as acting like a 13-year-old boy and not letting these kinds of things happen, what this ends up creating is one of the situations in this movie where Josh harms other people. Like seriously harms other people. At the end of the movie, when she's allegedly convinced, I'll get back to that in a little bit, that, okay, maybe he is 13 actually. He's walking away from the car, and there's that whole scene. Look at her face in that scene, how sweet she is and everything. No. She knows now for sure she slept with a 13-year-old. She got bamboozled. She committed a seriously immoral act, even though she didn't know she was doing it. That's a problem, folks. I mean, really? She has to live with that for the rest of her life. I mean, if you're looking at that like what it is, that's just wrong. And Penny Marshall plays it off as a sweet, adorable moment. You know, and second of all, Susan is not a sweet, adorable person. So we have to swallow that as well. We already know from earlier in the movie, from the asshole in the office, Paul, that she's sleeping her way to the top. She's a bed jumper. She's already slept with 4 guys, 4 executives to get to the top, and Paul was the 4th. She confirmed it in the scene. So she's a bed hopper, bed jumper, bed hopper, and to get to the top. So is that what she's doing with Josh? Because he is now the teacher's pet. Mr. McMillan, the owner of the business, the head of the business, has Josh in there as a vice president in charge of something, toy stuff, whatever. But so is he the new one? We can't be sure. We really can't be sure. So the soft moment doesn't sell. The ending on this movie is just horrible, clumsy, cringeworthy, noir-like, like almost horror movie-like. Really. And this isn't the only moment in the movie. Josh as an adult, played by Tom Hanks, overacted by Tom Hanks. I'll get to that here in a little bit. But is supposed to be this almost sort of Jesus type figure. Very nice, very innocent, very sweet, wouldn't harm anybody. You know, he's the sweet one even at the meetings, even when he's being talked down to by Paul, gets mad at by Paul, you know, all of this. But no, how many moments in this movie does he simply not care about somebody else or do somebody else wrong? How about his mom? After his mom thinks he's a burglar or some sort of sex criminal or something and chases him out of the house with a butcher knife.
You bastard, what did you do to my son?
I am your son, Mom.
Where is my child?
Mom.
Where is my son?
Mom.
He decides to go to disappear, and then later give her a call and say that he got kidnapped, and that the people who kidnapped him say he's going to be back in 6 weeks or a month or whatever it is. Can you imagine being the mom? Seriously. I mean, Josh couldn't think of something better than that? I mean, really, all you got to say? So she doesn't think you're horrible people have you and then you're going to die? All you got to say is, I ran away. That's all you got to say. Put it on you. That's what I would have done in that situation. You know? Say, Mom, I ran away. You're a great mom. And she is obviously a great mom. That's another reason why you feel for her. The things she does in the first few minutes of this movie, she's an awesome freaking mom. I want that mom. I mean, my mom was that good too. But, you know, she's a great mom. So he doesn't do that. He doesn't say, I ran away, Mom. I've just got some things that I want to do. I want to sort of be a man for a while. That would be kind of funny. I want to act like a man for a while. I can't tell you where I'm at, but I'm definitely coming back. I'm just going to experience some stuff. You know, I'm staying with some people I know, whatever, just whatever. Lie. If you're going to lie that way. So at least she doesn't think that she's still going to be worried, major worried, but she's not going to think that some sex crazed maniacs, killers have got a hold of you. So that's number 2. What he did to Susan, what he did to his mom, and then what he did to Billy when they spend that first night in the seedy hotel. I'm going to get over to the comedy that's missed in this movie here in a minute. But the third thing he did was to Billy. Great Billy, taking care of him. Steals the money for him, or, you know, took the money from the parents. Gets the money for Billy is the hero in this movie. Billy is the hero in this movie. He's the one character in this movie I adore. I love Billy. If I ever watch this movie again, I will only watch it for his performance and for who he is. Yeah, he's amazing. But Billy escorts Josh to the City Hotel while Josh is going to look for the Zoltron and try to get reverted back. And takes him in there. He's very, very nice with him, gets him into the room and everything else. And then, so there's that scene. So when Billy leaves, Josh knows that Billy is going out into a dangerous world. He's going down a dangerous hallway, down dangerous stairs, dangerous lobby where there's a dude lurking down there, as we saw earlier, and into the streets. And Josh doesn't say anything to Billy. Even though Josh says to Billy, I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. And Billy says, that'd probably be a good thing. Which I thought was a good phrase and a very thoughtful thing for him to say. He's thoughtful throughout this movie. But Josh doesn't turn to him and say, you got to be careful. Are you going to go home? Go this way, go that way to get home safe. It's not safe. He doesn't think about Billy the way Billy thinks about him. And yeah, Josh is a bit embattled. He's embattled because he's not young Josh anymore, even though it's what he asked for. But, and there's a gunshot outside, and it still doesn't occur to him, Billy. I mean, how nice would that have been for the writers and Penny Marshall to have him shout out, Billy, maybe even stick his head out the window to see if Billy's okay. Did Billy get shot? Just another missed moment in that as far as emotions and connection to us, the audience, that's missed by these ham-handed director and writers. And there's another moment in this. Oh yeah. So Mr. McMillan is very good with Josh, gives him the job. He's very thoughtful, and you can tell he's probably a bit of a curmudgeon, but he's got a soft heart for Josh. He loves his childlike behavior and everything else. Well, Josh walks out of that meeting, that presentation where he and Susan are giving the presentation, and doesn't come back. Just disappears on the man who was so nice to him. Yeah, and I get it. He's embattled in his brain. But what's more important to him is getting what he wants and not thinking about the people around him. So you got 4 people in this movie who suffer because of the way Josh is. And frankly, I think if they'd have made Billy the main character, and then somebody to represent Billy that's not Tom Hanks, somebody who acts like Billy acts, I think Billy in that presentation would have said, Mr. McMillan, it's been very nice working for you. I need to go. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed putting things together. And I really enjoyed the piano thing. Let's do that again sometime when I'm 23, when I'm older. There you go, when I get older. I really think Billy would have done that. So the main character in this, Josh, as a young guy, he's got some personality, no doubt. And I like the way that was done by the writers and Penny Marshall at the beginning, the first 2 or 3 minutes of this movie. They did a good job with that. It's not too complex. Just showed a guy. He's talking on the walkie-talkie at midnight with Billy. His mom catches him. That's a good scene. And it shows how sweet she is. So the 3 areas, comedy, drama, and romance. I'm going to start with drama. Every good comedy has to have a counterpose. There's got to be some drama to flesh out the comedy. In Some Like It Hot, you got the gangsters. Adds tension so that when you have the comedy is the comedy relief. It's great comedy because there's a little bit of tension. You got a little bit of worry. Oh, this is so funny. This movie forgets this. The dad completely disappears. No, we don't even, where the hell did he go? And the mom, played wonderfully by Mercedes Rule, Miss Baskin. Miss Baskin, we only see her briefly a couple of times. But when Josh calls her, I'm thinking, well, Josh, you're calling her, you better be careful. The FBI is going to be recording. No, there's no, if there are no officials there, there's no recording going on. She picks it up like it's an everyday occurrence. It's just unbelievable. What a great element that would have been to have the FBI involved in a kidnapping, and they're at her home. How about the tension with that? The counterpose with that. And in fact, he's on the phone so long that the FBI knows what building it came from. So they go to the building. And they tell the people that they're looking for Josh Baskin. And the people are like, well, we have a Josh Baskin working here, but he's 30 years old. And the police go, no, we're looking for a 12-year-old. But let us go ahead and talk with this Mr. Baskin. How interesting. What a great scene for humor and tension that would have been. FBI goes back and say there actually is a Josh Baskin working there, but he's 30 years old. And then she's like, what, really? Huh? And so, that whole thing, the tension that would have provided. And then even with the people working there, are you sure you're not 13, Josh? And Josh is like, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, they're looking for a 13-year-old, Josh. How much humor can you get out of that? Gets tension, gets humor, but instead we get a phone call where there's no police, no FBI, nothing. It's just unbelievable. Again, tone deaf, the writing, the directing. And this makes sense later in the movie, at the very end, when he's walking back and he turns into a boy again, the clothes are hanging off of him, and we're not allowed to experience the joy of the mother. We hear her go crazy with happiness inside the house. Yeah, it's not enough. I'm sitting there going, I want to be inside, I want to be inside, I want to be inside. But instead we get this angelic look on Susan's face. We're supposed to experience it through her. But she's got to have turmoil going on, but she's not showing it. So it's not satisfying. But the reason they don't show Josh's mom is because they threw her out of the movie. We couldn't get any closer to her. We're going to be reminded of what she went through if they put the camera back on her. So it's going to mitigate the experience we have. They did that on purpose because they threw her out of the movie. And that counterposing tension that would have been great throughout this movie. It would have been great to be thinking about her while he was doing his things. And then instead of writing her letters, while he's under kidnapping, while he's been kidnapped up there on the bed that time, then he can actually write her letters and say, hey, Mom, I ate a hoagie sandwich. It was really good. I should be back in about 3 weeks. Please don't worry about me. I got a tiny little job delivering papers or something like that, something. But she needed to be in the movie. She needed a bigger presence in the movie, especially because she was so freaking awesome in the first couple of minutes of the movie. So other drama in this that is missed is that I really think McMillan, the head of the company, should have taken him longer to warm up to Josh. It just happens too quickly. And I think they should have given him a little bit more edge, a little bit more crankiness. It's just, there's just no tension in this movie, really, to speak of, And even Paul comes across as sort of a cardboard, fast track kind of guy. They should have given Paul more edginess in dialogue, where he's actually really rude to Josh and everybody else. He's rude to Susan, But I mean, like, really give him an edge, to where this is an opponent now of Josh. This is a worry for us as the audience, for Josh. Got to worry about this guy. What's going to happen to Josh? But no, there's no tension. The writers and Penny Marshall attempt to do a hokey paddleball scene, where Paul expresses his anger. But the reason they did that is because they couldn't do it in dialogue. Yeah. They didn't know how to write this character. Any of the characters, except for Billy. Paul is played by John Hurd. So, played well with the lines he's got. So, there's just almost no drama in this movie. I mean, yeah, he wants to go back to being a kid, but we can't even get the drama of him. He does not even go in search of the Zoltar machines. He goes and files something, and he learns it'll be 6 weeks before he finds out where it might be. But there are amusement parks all around New York. He could be taking Billy around and looking during this time if he really cared about being small again. So there's just no tension in this movie. Very little tension in this movie. So tension situations are often the best places for comedy. Like when Josh and Billy show up at the seedy hotel and the guy tells them it's $17.50 for one night and $10 for the sheets as a deposit on the sheets. Never heard that one before. But $17.50 back in 1988 was a lot of money. So, I would imagine if I'm a kid, a 12-year-old kid at that point, I'm thinking for $17.50, I better get a freaking deluxe room and hotel. So I think it would have been funny at that point if Penny Marshall would have had both of the boys, when they hear that price, they kind of look around at the place, And then the guy, the clerk, the dude, he goes, don't worry about it, guys. I'll give you the executive suite. and then one of the boys goes, why is there a $10 deposit on the sheets? And the guy just looks at him like they're supposed to know. And they just kind of look around. So also, the guy doesn't say anything to them about there only being one single bed in there. And it looks like there's going to be a dad with his son. So that was strange. Again, this is directing. That stuff's got to be taken care of by the writers and the director. It's got to be taken care of. And then one problem I have as far as tension is concerned is when they're in the room. And Josh does not have an existential crisis. I mean, he's going to be all alone in New York City. Yeah, I mean, he does. He curls. You get the stereotypical fetal, curling up into the fetal position on the bed. Really? Really? I'd like to have a little bit more kick-assness with him, but I think at some point he should have gone to Billy. So, I'm not sure I could do this, Billy. I'm not sure. Maybe there's another way. And they have a conversation about it. And they finally figure out there is no other way. But no, there's not that. So it would have been a good scene for that. And they could have found some ways to have some humor in there as well. Anyway, so there's just virtually no drama or tension in this movie. So as far as comedy goes, well, there's one more scene I want to talk about as far as tension is concerned and realism. Because this movie seriously lacks in realism. Horrible writing on this movie. So, the very first one is the one I showed at the beginning of this reaction, when Josh sees Billy sees grown-up Josh for the first time at the basketball court, and we're supposed to believe that Billy believes that's Josh after one little skit that they do.
Shimmy, shimmy, cocoa butt, shimmy, shimmy, rock. I met a girlfriend, a Trisket. She said a Trisket, a biscuit, ice cream, soda, pop, on top. Ooh, Shalita, walking down the street, 10 times a week. I met it, I said it, I stole my mama's credit. I'm cool, I'm hot, sock you in the stomach 3 more times.
Josh?
I can tell you, for me, if I'm Billy, I'm like, this dude's a pervert. He's been watching me and Josh. 'Cause you're not going to be convinced after one little skit that's your, this is a grown-up man. He's got a stubble. Twice the size, more than twice the age. You're not going to believe it after one little skit. It's not going to happen. So there's got to be more. Josh has got to be like, oh, well, we did this back then, and this is your favorite ice cream, and all this, and Billy he's still not buying it. And finally, Josh just gives up and sits down. This is the way it should have played out. Gives up, sits down. Billy's about to run out, but sees that the guy's despondent. And then Josh says something that only those two would know about. Something way back. It says something about, maybe the time Billy ran over to his house because his parents were fighting. But something that convinces Billy that this could really actually be Josh. And then Billy says, okay, maybe you're Josh, but how? How? And then Josh gets to go into the Zoltar thing. Say how it happened. It was unplugged. All of this other stuff. But it didn't happen until the morning. And then his mom, chased him out with a butcher knife and all this. After a certain amount, this scene in the movie, it only lasts a little bit more than a minute and 10 seconds. Can you believe that? A minute and 10 seconds of the movie, and Billy's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're Josh. No. We need a better, more emotional connection, believable scene. So it's yet again, after the whole mirror scene, which is just ludicrous. And then the second one, this comes soon afterwards. Again. Oh, and by the way, his underwear wasn't even split in that scene. And the mom, talk about bad directing, while the mom's pulling up his clothes, you can't really tell that they're ripped. In fact, I'm not sure they were ripped.
What does he do in his sleep?
But that should have been a camera angle where his clothes were completely ripped open. So we could see that. That would be funny. And also, he should have found out as soon as he hit the floor. Anyway, just over and over and over. Horrible writing, horrible directing on this movie. You're just constantly going, wow, really? So as regards to the humor, the comedy on this movie, the problem with this, with the directing and the writing on this was they didn't know, how to create a barely 13-year-old boy, what 13-year-old boys are like, and then how to transpose that to a 30-year-old man and keep him in that character because he keeps popping out. He doesn't do things or say things that a 13-year-old would say. One example of this is the John Lovitz scene and the lady.
See that girl over there in the red? She'll wrap her legs around you so tight you'll be begging for mercy.
Well, I'll stay away from her then.
Yeah. So that's not what a 13-year-old boy or a 12-year-old boy at the time, that's not what he would say. He wouldn't say, I'll stay away from her. A 13-year-old boy wrestles all the time with his friends. They get each other. We did. My friends and I. Got each other in headlocks, leg locks, all this other stuff. So some guy telling him that she could put a leg lock on you, on your head. Most 13-year-old boys be like, game on. Cool. She sounds cool. So how about the comedy that could come if that's the way he says that? If he looks over at John Lovitz and goes, cool, really? Wow, Billy does that to me, and I do that to Billy. And John Lovitz is like, Billy? You do that with Billy? And of course, he's looking at a 30-year-old man. Josh is a 30-year-old man. You do that with Billy? And then Josh's like, yeah, all the time. I get out, then I put him in one. It's a lot of fun. And then I come up from behind And then John Lovitz is like, and then Josh is like, maybe she would like to join our club. And John Lovitz's character, which was Scotty, yeah. Scotty's like, a club? You have a club that does this? So all of a sudden, John Lovitz has that look on his face like, he underestimated this guy. This guy's a sexual maniac. He and men and women getting each other into sexual headlocks. Imagine the comedy with that. They could have done this over and over in the movie. If they'd kept him in the childlike character, if he would have responded to that comment in his 12-year-old, 13-year-old way. But they keep missing out. They keep they keep giving him the dialogue that an adult would say. Another example of this is on the piano. When in the store, when he and Macmillan, who's played wonderfully by Robert Loggia, are doing the whole piano scene, and Robert Loggia looks over at him and says, played the piano, and he goes, and he looks over, and Josh's response is a very man response. 3 years.
Piano lessons. 3 years.
That's not how a 13-year-old respond. A 13-year-old go, yes. And then Macmillan would smile. And then say something like, me too, 8 years. Something like that, whatever. But you miss out on the humor. It's tone deaf. This movie is tone deaf. It's got a 10 ear. The scene with the piano is pretty well done, but it's too long. Do you know that piano scene is more than 2 minutes? And it's fun to watch for the first 30, 40 seconds, but it gets old. Oh, good. We're in a store. We get to watch a couple of guys on the big piano. Really? 2 minutes. That scene right there is almost twice as long as the scene where Billy is confronted by the big Josh at the basketball place. That tells you something about the writing and directing on this movie. What the hell are they doing? Is it just supposed to be a frolic? Is this supposed to be a family movie? Well, it can't be a family movie because this guy you've got being sort of a 30-year-old childlike saint, a romantic, frilly, fun-loving saint, is screwing everybody around him, and metaphorically. Of course, the movie doesn't. The people don't understand it who made this movie. They don't get that. So another scene that doesn't really work very well, it sort of kind of does, is that scene with the robot and the building that turns into a robot presentation by Paul.
Well, if you had read your industry breakdown, you would see that our success in the action figure area has climbed from 27% to 45% in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So the thing with that I found interesting, I thought Tom Hanks again kind of overplayed this in the sense that, he kind of puts up his hand and acts like he's thinking about something or looking around. I like the hand raising. That was good, deferential to the adults or whatever. But, it just kind of overplays it. It's not like he's looking and he looks up and he puts his hand up.
No, not for me.
Yes?
Like he's energetically going to barnstorm with his ideas. I think that's how a boy would really do it. But that aside, what he says is that his problem, this is a logical problem in the writing, and that is what he says, that a bunch of people have robots turning into something, but you have a building turning into a robot. If you follow the logic on that, that means what Paul has done is actually good.
There's a million robots that turn into something. And this is a building that turned into a robot. So what's fun about playing with a building? That's not any fun.
This is a skyscraper.
Well, couldn't it be like a robot that turns into something like a bug or something?
Everybody's got robots turning into something. Paul and his crew have a building turning into a robot. Isn't that good? So I'm confused. So then Josh follows up with, I think you should have he literally says, as you just heard, he literally says, I think you should have the robot turning into something. After he said, everybody has robots turning into something. It's like, my brain is frying. And they turned into a bug, you know, and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, where did the writers, were the writers high when they wrote this script? I do like that comment by Paul.
This doesn't just happen. This doesn't happen. He doesn't just come to a meeting and say bugs.
It's good acting by John Hurt on that. So another problem I have with the movie, I'll get back to more of the comedy here in a second, but while I'm thinking about it, another problem I have is Susan even falling for Josh. You know, she's an up-and-comer, so to speak, who's sleeping around to get to the top. And so she's no nonsense, as she shows in that one scene where Josh first meets her. By the way, him staring at her ass, no 12-year-old boy around adults with an adult sitting in front of him, no 12-year-old boy would do that. That is not cute, Penny Marshall. That's not cute. That's not what 12-year-old boys do. I mean, sure, they'll take a peek at a breast that's hanging out in front of them, but they're not going to sit there and stare. The mannerisms and everything that they give to, almost everything they give to Tom Hanks in this movie and the way Tom Hanks plays it is just kind of bizarre, really. And that's one of the bizarre moments. But I don't see Susan falling for him. He's too silly. He's too manic. I think who she may have fallen for is a 30-year-old Billy. You know? Because he actually would have personality. Because Tom Hanks' character doesn't really have much personality. He's kind of like, you know, and sort of, and then, you know, all this stuff. It's slapstick. He's a slapstick. He plays the part as a slapstick. And it just doesn't work. It's shallow. So another place that strains credulity on this concerning Susan is her alleged epiphany during that presentation with Josh that Josh walks out of, where he does walk out and he had just told her the previous day, I think it was, that, you know, he's really a kid. She didn't take it seriously. She had that funny comment.
Oh my God, you're married.
No.
I thought that was a funny scene. It was one of the few actually truly funny scenes in the movie. But there's no possible way that Susan would believe during the presentation, have an epiphany that he actually is physically the embodiment of a 13-year-old. She would not. Maybe Billy would, after a bunch of convincing, as I said a while ago, a bunch of personal recollections and convincing everything else. But Susan, no. She's a skeptic. She has been in business long enough to be skeptical of men, what they say, what they do. So she's not going to believe it. Now, she might think, oh, you know, he's childlike and I'm going to go protect him, you know, and everything else. But she cannot possibly be convinced. So when she goes up to the Zoltar machine and everything else, it's got to be a fantasy. It's his fantasy. I mean, she's got to actually, at this point, seriously be thinking he's a bit deranged. Really. She can't be in love with him. And that actually would set up at least pretty decent final scene where he's walking away and does turn in to a 13-year-old. And her face does this. She jumps out of the car and looks at him. And he turns around, knows that she never truly believed it, and he just nods. Take care, Susan. You know, that would have been a poignant scene. But she can't possibly believe it. So again, we're being asked to strain our credulity, to believe what cannot possibly be believed. movie does it so much, it's incredible. So getting around again to the comedy, sort of the antics and everything, it's thrown in our faces. I mean, him in the white tuxedo, that's actually good. I like that. But him coming down in front of everybody and everybody staring, really, did we have to have that?
You'll never forget.
Couldn't he just be walking in and talking with somebody and the room slowly starts noticing, you know? And then any boy who does that knows if he does come down to that elevator and everybody's looking at him, they know they're looking at his suit because he's looking around. He sees he's the only one dressed that way. But they put in that little bit where he kind of checks his zipper. No. That's cutesy. That's not what he would do. It's not a zipper. He knows it's not a zipper. They're not looking at a zipper. A guy knows when people are looking at a zipper. So again, they're trying to over-cutesify this. So he's a boy. He's a kid. That's what he thinks of. No. And again, it just rings untrue. Tone deaf. And then the overlong scene with him at the buffet table. The thing with the celery. He's doing a rabbit thing. First of all, I've never known a guy who did that. Ever. I mean, I didn't. I just grab it and I walk away. I start chewing on it. Take a bunch of dip, walk away. You don't sit there. Every 12-year-old knows, at the buffet table, your manners at the buffet table. So again, they're trying to over-cutesify it. Let's make him look like a boy who's spontaneous. And again, it doesn't ring true. And then the baby corn, really? Okay, yeah, I hadn't seen baby corn by the time I was 12, but I'm not going to sit there and do a Peter Rabbit on it. I mean, seriously, that kind of slapstick, that kind of cheap slapstick, and it just goes on forever. I think that's like 20 seconds. 1/3 the amount of time that was spent with Billy and Josh there in the basketball area. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then her walking up, and then the whole romance thing is just really strange in this movie because they don't keep him in a 13-year-old frame of mind. They start moving him over into a 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, whatever year old mind, and he starts growing up. That's not going to happen. It's not believable. And what ends up happening is they miss out on a bunch of great humor. So, for instance, on that scene when they're going into his room and she's going to stay, then she asks if she can come in.
I mean, I like you and I want to spend the night with you.
Do you mean sleep over?
Well, yeah.
Okay. But I get to be on top.
And I like the acting by Susan on that, where she's kind of confused and she's like, yeah. And then if they've got him in a childlike state of mind and they're thinking about him as a boy, the first thing out of his mouth is, well, I never had a girl sleepover before. Imagine the humor that creates. She's like, oh, really? Is there something you're not telling me? And he's like, no, it's just only the guys sleep over. Mostly Billy. She's like, who's Billy? He's like, that's my best friend. She's like, oh, he's also your best friend? He's like, yeah, he's my best friend. And she's like, okay, well, are you gay? And he's like, I'm not sure he would know what that is. I guess he would. He'd be like, no. I mean, but the comedy. Keep him in the 13-year-old frame of mind always. That's where he's supposed to be. So what's the next question that comes up? What kind of sleepovers does he have with guys? That's the first thing that comes into his brain. But the people who wrote this don't seem to understand this. It's strange. It's bizarre. While I'm watching, I'm sitting there thinking, this is what he would say. But he doesn't say it. I'm like, who wrote this? So and if they'd have kept him in a 17-year-old frame of mind, a 13-year-old frame of mind, when she is taking her shirt off and he's standing there, I'm not sure it would have ever gotten that far if they'd have done it right, but let's say it did. Then he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, what do you think I'm doing? He's like, are you cold? I mean, are you too hot? And she's like, well, actually, yes. He's like, oh, well, okay. I'll take my shirt off too. Run with the humor. But it doesn't go anywhere. Find things, I mean, you just plumb the humor on that, but they can't go to bed. He can't do that. There are he can make some mistakes in the movie, obviously. Like, give her a quick kiss on the dance floor, quick kiss. And then he's blushing. And she's like, well, why can't I get more than that? He's like, oh, gets nervous because he's 13, folks. He's 13. Okay. So, yeah. One more thing I have on as far as the directing is concerned, I was just going to mention real quick, was the trampoline scene. I thought the directing on that was good as far as camera angles. I thought the camera angles were just fantastic. A little ways away, them watching, the camera going with them up on the scene, and then outside across the street. I really like that. But the way they handled the two actors, the way Penny Marshall handled the two actors, where Susan's she's done twice, she's going to walk off. But as she's walking off, he's about to go get her. She starts walking back on like he's already got her. So she's gotten ahead of the direction. So it looks like she doesn't really want to walk off, or she's not going to walk off. That's just bad directing, folks. That happened twice. So just throughout this movie. And just to point out one other, so many areas in this movie where they could have made things a little bit more poignant, maybe even a little bit funny, was there in the beginning when he's at the carnival and he's trying to get the girl and they're going to go on the ride. He says he's already been on the ride, but as he gets up there, the carnival guy says, you can't go on there.
Read this sign. You must be at least this big to ride this ride.
What?
Hey, I don't make the rules. Next! Next!
What could have been said if the writers had been thinking about how to make this interesting, poignant, funny, etc., they would have had the carnival guy go, you can't go on there. You got to be that tall. You got to be, well, as tall as her. Points to the girl. And Josh looks over at the girl and she's looking at him like startled. And then Josh looks back at the guy and the guy's got a little smirk on his face like he knows what's going on. And that digs it in on Josh. Makes him more want to be big. To be as big as her, bigger than her. So, and they missed out on that. There's so many moments. I could go through 24 places where that was not done in the writing and then the director. It always comes down to the director. The director makes the final decisions. Is the script not good enough? Let's change the script. Penny Marshall didn't do it. If I were to rate this movie on the direction, I'm not even sure I'd give it any popcorns. Maybe a 1 for a couple of scenes. Like the piano scene was done pretty well. Trampoline scene was done pretty well. A few other scenes were done okay. But it's just incredibly bad directing on this movie. Yeah. So all in all, what they should have done in this movie is taken the romance out of it, sort of hinted at it, but it just never can go anywhere because, he's 13 years old. And they should have had some people come in who knew what 12 and 13-year-old boys do. They wrestle all the time. They're rambunctious. They scrape their bodies up all the time because they're physical. They prank. They kid. They're confident. They're confident in everything they do except for one thing, generally speaking, and that is around girls they like. That's their kryptonite for boys. Now, if they'd have gone with that, with this movie, with Tom Hanks' character, and told Tom, that's how you play this, then this would have been a much better movie. So much humor. They could have made this a 10 popcorn out of 10. They could have made this a great movie if they'd have stayed with that. So yeah, I'm going to give this 3 popcorns out of 10. I hope y'all enjoyed this. And please leave your comments, anything I missed, anything I got wrong, or just criticisms or praise or whatever you want to say. Just say it in the comment section. I'll look forward to that. Take care of yourselves. Bye now.